So it probably doesn't take a genius to work out that I'm a big fan of the Lost Ark series. I previously did a video on just my reasons of why I really enjoyed it, and thank you for all the positive feedback on that. So Lost Ark at its core is a MMO, but there are elements that kind of make it different from your more traditional formula. Now I think a lot of this is the difference between Western and Eastern MMOs, but I thought I'd outline some of the more specific details of it just to give people a comparison and let them know what they're walking into. This is more the leveling dungeons. There are a whole plethora of late game ones as well, and cubes that we'll get onto a little bit later on in another video. But for now, I'm just going to talk about the low level dungeons and what you're going to expect and what you can do, etc. Most of the dungeons you end up doing anyway as you progress through the game because they are heavily tied into the story. They are a minimum of 1 player all the way up to a maximum of 4. And the great thing that I really like is the fact that you can do them on your own. In fact, I will go as far to say is that I haven't teamed up with anyone so far to do any of the leveling dungeons, which is both a blessing and a curse, because on one hand you could argue that, well, what's the difference between just running around and doing quests, and that having that challenge is nice. But on the other hand, it's also nice to not be gatekeeped behind a triad of the Holy Trinity. So you're either stuck being DPS, a healer, a tank, or waiting for one of the others to come into your group. Additionally, another thing worth mentioning is that there are a multitude of modes you can do on these dungeons. And while they are gated behind an eye level, they're not actually gated behind a level cap. So unlike WoW, where you wanted to do a heroic, you had to have an eye level and be 60 plus, for example, this is no longer the case. In the normal mode, you'll get a flat set of items that you can use to upgrade your character. In hard mode, you'll get even better items, and you'll also get access to more additional items. So essentially, the items are better and you get more loot. Now I am speculating that previously the two systems were a little bit different and that hard mode was a lot harder, because so far I've done everything on hard and I haven't run into any problems whatsoever playing on my own. It's also worth noting that completing the dungeons are also tied into unlocking your continents. So what this is, for every continent there is a set of check marks and achievements that you can do to unlock various things. These include killing off all the monster types in the area, completing the main quest, completing all the dungeons, finding all the hidden stories, and also leveling up all the reputations. Once you've done this, you get access to different items, which will give you further unlocks in the cosmetic region. So in a nutshell, they're definitely worth doing. So once you're in the dungeon and you're ready to get going, it is basically a slew of constant fighting all the way to the very end boss. The dungeons overall are relatively short. They usually take me between 10 and 20 minutes per one. And unlike other traditional dungeon formats, there's usually a mini boss and a main boss for you to deal with. The main boss is the one who drops all the shiny loot that you see at the start of the intro, and aside that, it is all random up to that point. As previously mentioned, the quests are usually tied into the story, so you can't just simply run from the start all the way to the end and skip everything. You have to do various check marks. These are usually pretty simple, so kill all the enemies, throw a switch, or run down this path or something. But there are basic mechanisms that stop you from basically just annihilating everything in one single pull. That being said, the dungeons are incredibly fun. They are fully cinematically driven. There are lots of big open cutscenes for you to enjoy and relish in. And if you're experiencing them for the first time, it just makes them feel that much more enriched and enjoyable, and makes you feel part of the universe. Additionally, there are a huge amount of dungeons and they've been really fun. So far, each territory that I've gone into, there's usually one on the map, and I've only had 1 or 2 that I've had the opportunity to skip, which I didn't do so far because they've all been so fun. In terms of downsides though to these dungeons, I will say once I've completed the story part of it, there hasn't really been any incentive for me to go back and have a look at it again. Any loot that's shown to drop on the map is generally there at the end of the boss, so you don't have to rerun it to keep farming. And while I don't have full visibility of all the late game at the moment, I still don't know if there is actually any incentive to go back or any reason for people to want to. And I think it's for this reason that you end up with quite a polarized view on at least the leveling dungeons, because on one hand you've got dungeons that are very short and sweet and allow you to do them, get loot and move on. But on the other hand, you do lose that kind of magic of going into a dungeon, fighting multiple bosses, through the dungeon, and then getting various loot from each one and doing it as a squad. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't exist, because it does in the endgame content, and you do have the opportunity to do that later on. But in terms of leveling, there just isn't that experience for you. And if you look at this from a holistic point of view, it's going into dungeons as a group that allows you to form social bonds and make friends and, enjoy the MMO experience even more. And, it goes without saying that part of the whole MMO experience is that joy of meeting people, making new friends, connections, and doing things as groups. Anyway, I'll keep this short and sweet, and we'll do the late game in another video sometime. But for now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, what you think of MMOs and dungeons. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you like the idea of the Lost Ark Dungeon system? Let me know in the comments. But for now, have a great week, everyone, and I'll see you all soon.